European Union calls for more urgency in Gambia's transitional reform process. Sudanese transitional government signed a peace deal with rebel groups. And health experts slammed Donald Trump's drive-past visit to supporters while receiving COVID-19 treatment. These and more coming your way on The World Today. Hello, this is Africa TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante and now the news in detail. And we begin with matters of the EU because the European Union has said it has observed with growing concern a marked slowdown in the pace of the reform process in the Gambia over the last months following the rejection of the draft promulgation bill 2020. The EU High Representative and Vice President Joseph Borrell said in a statement on Monday that it is key for the 2021 presidential elections to take place on the basis of a new social contract. Mr. Borrell said that the constitutional review process is linked to other pillars of a democratic transition, such as the Truth Commission and the security sector reform. Therefore, it is important to lay the foundation for the follow-up to these processes. The European Union also calls on the Barrow-led government to take the lead in building the necessary national consensus and around the future direction of the democratic transition with a new constitution as its core. Well, now joining us on the line to discuss on this statement is the EU ambassador to the Gambia, Atola Lyons, and Anna Van Densky, a journalist and a political commentator from Brussels. Well, many thanks to both of you for joining us. First to Anna, well, is the EU worried about is the EU worried that all the transitional process could fail after the rejection of the draft constitution by Gambia's National Assembly?
Well, I don't think that it's so far and so bad, because we see that there is very vivid reaction of Gambian people. So I think that it's too early to say that everything is failed. It hasn't failed yet. But of course there are concerns, because there were great hope of Gambian people that there will be a very successful transition. And there were 3 years, and Adama Barrow promised 3 years. And there were different plans, different pillars that the government has to follow. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. And now there is certain pause, I would say, because this pause has caused a frustration of people. But I mean that the crucial thing is that Gambians are very active and they protest and they express their opinions, and still you feel that they're very different people. And it's great that they have these expectations and they apply pressure to the government and to the leadership. Right. But still, I think that now the ball is on the side of the legislators, because the greatest frustration is that they didn't react as they should. And the point is, of course, that it's not possible to go on with this old constitution, and everybody knows that it should be changed, and I'm sure it will be changed in the nearest future.
All right, now how much of a role can the EU play in Gambia's transitional process, which had been seen to be meddling in the country's internal affairs, as politicians alleged recently when the EU urged the National Assembly to allow the draft constitution to move to the next stage?
You're asking me?
Yes, you, Anna.
Listen, I think that the position of European Union is very clear, because they are supporting the African Union and they are supporting ECOWAS. So they are supporting African countries and African leaders who are trying to guide this transition period, or to assist this transition period, which is very much are expected by people of Gambia. So I don't think that our European Union, or it's a misunderstanding that European Union can replace, or any international institution can replace the nation construction and the state construction by in any country, including Gambia. So I think that the biggest pressure should be applied to legislators, that they have to fulfill their work and they have to be creative and to be active and to be effective, because what happened with the Constitution shows that they are not effective in their roles. So I think that what you can do, it's already doing a lot of things, and it has been doing, and it also has been supporting the Gambians are economically. And for example, they have brilliant projects like clean energy for Gambia.
Okay.
So, but all these kind of things are secondary to the will of Gambian people and to the creativity of their legislators. Okay. And they have to be the nation.
To the Mr. Ambassador now, Mr. Ambassador, it appears the enthusiasm, of course, from the government on the transitional program from the start is now dwindling. Now, is the EU worried the entire transitional process could fail?
No, I think we will have to take the HRVP statement as it is. It's a very clear expression of interest, promoting the values we are representing, and of course in support of democracy building in the Gambia. This is not about the system failing. This is rather a strong call on the continuation of this democratic transition by delivering results in the various different avenues the government has started and the country as a whole has embarked on since 2016.
Now, the EU has been providing support to the current government since 2017 regarding transition and other programs. Now, where in the entire transitional process fails to get the political will from the government to be fully implemented, will the EU consider cutting to the Gambia?
I do not see the government failing to carry on with the changes. So I don't believe that we are at a stage like that and the transition is not failing. I do believe what is important to underline that there is still 1.5 years ahead of the Gambia till the next presidential election. So it is keenly important that the time is used most efficiently to make sure that the interlinked, interconnected pillars of the transitional justice will all lead to the ambitious objectives.
Now, finally, Mr. Ambassador, what do you think could be the way forward?
Can you please repeat your last, because I couldn't hear you.
I was just asking, what do you think could be the way forward?
No, can you please repeat, because the line is distorted.
All right. Of course, I was just saying, after all this process as we speak, I was just asking, what do you think now it should be the way forward in this entire process?
If you are asking what I believe should be the
way forward, yes. Yes.
The way forward, I think that's exactly what the statement is about, emphasizing the ambitious goals to be achieved, and it's obvious that it can only be achieved if a new approach is undertaken to building the necessary national consensus for the future direction of the democratic transition in the country, and of course for the revisiting the issue of the constitutional draft to be eventually brought again to the Parliament and have it endorsed, so the people could choose at the referendum next year before the next presidential election.
All right. Finally, to you, Anna, do you think the EU would be more committed now to support Gambia in this process, despite the concerns that were raised?
Well, I don't think that the commitment of the EU is something that will fail, because I think that they are very much committed to the cause of transition of Gambian people to democracy, and it should be understood that they are committed in first place to the Gambian people. In that way, we can't say that, like school children, if they don't behave properly, the government doesn't behave properly, or the legislators, now there will be no support. There will be support, but there is a question, as Ambassador said, the question of efficiency, because in the best interest of Gambians themselves is to use the support efficiently and on time and not create a protracted political crisis.
Okay.
And from that point of view, the crucial thing is that the legislators assume their responsibility and they move on the country forward, because all these long pauses, they are not contributional to the development, to the transition, to democracy, and in the end of the day, they create frustration and they are a lost opportunity for the Gambians. So I think that I wouldn't agree with the way you formulated the question,
right,
that something happens you will not support the Gambians, because there is a commitment to Gambian people and that will stay.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Attila Lajos, and of course, Anna, a journalist and political commentator from Brussels. Many thanks to speaking to us. All right, that was the EU ambassador to the Gambia, and Anna Van Zaski, a journalist and political commentator, speaking to us on the latest statement released by the EU with regards to Gambia's political transition. Now, we move on. Gambia's President Adam Barrow has said in motion plans to rebuild the market in Basse after a fire in February this year ravaged the entire market. The government said the reconstruction will cost $100 million. Umar Ahmad Toure tells us more in this report.
When a fire outbreak ravaged the market in Basse, 373 kilometers south of Banjul, several shops were lost to the inferno, leaving lives and livelihoods severely affected. Estimates on the overall damage caused by the fire was over $500 million, according to the Basse Area Council, the local government authority overseeing the Upper River region. On Saturday, President Adam Barrow laid the foundation stone for the new Basse market, which his government said will be of standard and will be made up of 185 individual shops. It will also have a paved sustainable drainage system and an installed electrical system, according to President Adam Barrow.
It must be emphasized, however, that the need is very urgent for this settlement to have a functional market once again. I urge them, therefore, to complete the works ahead of schedule, if possible. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am glad and proud to state that the Basse Market project is fully funded by the government of the Gambia at an estimated cost of $100 million.
President Barrow also said he is committed to providing basic services and amenities to Gambians.
My vision for the new Gambia is a country where the highest standards of good governance are upheld. Citizens enjoy access to basic services and the enabling environment is created for the private sector to thrive.
After a survey and design by GAMWorks, Jigo Construction and Guy Enterprise are the two firms contracted to rebuild the market. The Minister of Transport, Works and Infrastructure, by Lamin Job, said the funds to rebuild the market comes from the Supplementary Appropriation Bill. The money we should use to sponsor the market construction was not available. It was not allocated in the budget. His Excellency sent us to the National Assembly to raise the Supplementary Appropriation Bill, and we took some money and put it in the budget, which you know would be able to construct this market and some other projects. Basse is the Gambia's second capital. It lies on the south bank of the River Gambia. The town is well known as a major business hub for traders from Senegal, Guinea, and Mali. It is a significant connection for intra-West African trade and sub-regional integration. For iAfrica TV, I am Omar Ahmad Toure.
The Gambia government commits $100 million to build a new market in Basse. Now to neighboring Senegal, where the Grand Magal, the Touba, celebrates the departure in exile of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, the founder of the Murid sect. This year's Magal is opening on the 6th of October. The annual gathering brings together more than 4 million Muslims, followers of the Sheikh from West Africa and other parts of the world. With coronavirus ravaging Senegal, the country has so far recorded 15,000 cases, of which 12,000 recovered and 312 dead. Fears have been raised about the possibility of a new outbreak of the coronavirus as millions move into the city of Touba, which has approximately 1 million inhabitants. On Sunday, the Gambia government said in a statement that it was discouraging aspirant attendees of the Grand Magal of Touba to not go. But it appears the weak implementation of the border control means of the government can't stop pilgrims from leaving Gambia for Senegal. As a result, a government spokesman said those who intend to attend the Grand Magal will have to provide negative COVID test results upon return before they will be allowed to re-enter into the Gambia. The government also said pilgrims will bear the cost of their test, which could be more than $6,900. It says those who fail to provide negative tests shall undergo mandatory quarantine at their own cost. Adam Barrow and his government has been criticized for violating its own COVID-19 rules as the president continues to gather hundreds of people in rural areas in the name of laying foundation stone for several projects. Now to the U.S., where U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday pays a drive past visit to his supporters outside the hospital where he is receiving his COVID-19 treatment. But medical experts have said or have raised concern over the president's decision that he may have endangered the two service staff together with him in the car, even though they wore protective gears. Sona Tunkara has more details of that in this report.
Less than 24 hours after testing positive for COVID-19, President Trump was transported at the Walter Reed Military Hospital in Maryland on Friday to receive treatment. Mr. Trump on Sunday was seen paying a drive past to visit his supporters at the hospital where he is currently receiving treatment. Experts say the president's shortcut trip broke public health advice to quarantine when seeking treatment for the virus and may have put Secret Service agents inside the vehicle at risk of infection. However, the White House George Dare defended the move, saying appropriate precautions were taken in the execution of this movement to protect the president and all those supporting it, including personal protective equipment. Meanwhile, Democrats have also criticized the trip, with House of Representatives Hakeem Jeffries tweeting that they need leaders and not photo-ops. A growing number of people around the president, including his wife Melania Trump, senior aides and Republican senators, have tested positive with the virus. According to Johns Hopkins University, the United States has recorded 7.4 million COVID-19 cases with more than 200,000 people dead. For iAfrica TV, Sohna Tunkara.
And from the report by Sohna Tunkara, now joining me on the line to discuss more on this from the Washington, D.C. is Johanna LeBlanc, a National Security and Foreign Affairs legal analyst. Well, thank you very much, Johanna, for joining us. Now, Trump left the hospital to drive past supporters when he should be receiving treatment. Is he trying to gain the sympathy of voters ahead of the November elections?
Thank you so much for having me on. But yes, you're correct. The president did leave the hospital for a split moment to greet his supporters who were standing outside of the hospital. And what you said is very, very important in terms of trying to gain the sympathy of voters. I think that just by the essence of the president being ill, he has already gained the sympathy of some of the American voters, because we know America are people who are very sympathetic. We have a huge heart here in this country. For example, the Bush presidency should have been a one-term president. But after 9/11 happened, the country essentially rallied behind President Bush, and ultimately he was reelected. And so what we're seeing here is the same kind of situation. While, this is not a situation where there has been a terrorist attack or anything like this, but there is a tragedy. And whenever there's a tragedy in this country, people tend to rally behind their leader in solidarity.
All right. Now, of course, health experts have expressed concern over his action, now saying he was exposing people around him to the virus. Do you think this will in any way affect his re-election chances?
Well, the president, by being COVID positive, will have some kind of some implication. Now, the question is whether the implications will be good or bad. But what we do know is that not just the president and the first lady who have tested positive for this virus, we also know that a number of his advisors and his aides, and most recently the press secretary, has been tested positive for the virus. So what this means is that we do have a number of presidential debates that are scheduled in the coming days. So the question is now whether or not the president will have a chance to debate his policy positions with the Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden. But again, like I said earlier, this could work against and also for the president. It depends. But again, like we know, this year is like no other. It's unprecedented, so anything can happen at this time.
All right. Now, is Trump's COVID illness a good thing for Joe Biden, since he has the chance to continue engaging voters physically while Trump can't at this moment?
So Joe Biden did test negative for the virus, but because we know that the incubation period is roughly 5 days, we don't really know if Joe Biden is indeed negative. But what the Trump administration has laid out for now is Mike Pence, who is the vice president, will continue with the debate, with the campaigning for the party, for the administration. But also, let's just say that Trump were to be severely ill and that he can no longer engage in his duties as the president. Now, what you will have is the command, the line of succession would be Vice President Biden would be the acting president while the president is sick, and then if something happens to Pence, rather, we will go over to Nancy Pelosi, who's the Speaker of the House.
All right, Johanna, many thanks for your time, and thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, that was Johanna speaking to us live from Washington, who's a political analyst. And with that, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remaining of the stories. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back, and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin on iAfrica TV. And now to the rest of the stories. And next we head to Sudan, where the Sudanese government signed a comprehensive peace deal with several rebel groups on Saturday after years of conflict across the country. The ceremony was attended by a number of Arab and African head of states, prime ministers and officials, in addition to the representative from the African Union and United Nations. Well, Julden Jai has more details of that in this report.
For many years, during which they lived devastating wars that have caused political, economic and social crises, and their effects still exist, and we are all working to defeat them.
The agreement between the government of Sudan and Sudan Revolutionary Front, an alliance of rebel groups, was signed at a ceremony in Juba, the capital of neighboring South Sudan. Speaking during the signing ceremony, Chairman of the Sovereignty Council of Sudan, Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, said they are achieving the most important goals and slogans of their glorious revolutions and its demands, which is peace.
The peace that the sons and daughters of Sudan paid their souls and blood to achieve, because peace is the dream that has been haunting the Sudanese for many years, during which they lived devastating wars that have caused political, economic and social crises, and their effects still exist, and we all working to defeat them throughout the nation with all determinations, will and existence to stop the bloodshed.
While extending his gratitude to those that stood with them at the important stage in their country's history, Mr. Burhan said he is hopeful that the signing of the peace deal will help in driving efforts to remove Sudan from the list of countries sponsoring terrorism, lift economic sanctions, and take everything that will preserve Sudan's unity and security.
We reaffirm that on this historical day, we will never go back to war, and we will never deviate from the path of peace. We also affirm our kindness to implement what has been reached in all tracts and regions. In terms of security arrangement, national issues and political issues, there is no doubt that the result of this agreement will support and help the government of the transitional period, and it will inject spirit, blood and insightful national visions, expand political participation in the transitional period, and help achieve a smooth transition towards a state of peace, justice, citizenship and democracy.
The recently signed agreement addresses matters relating to the sharing of wealth and power, political and national issues, security arrangements, land ownership, and related disputes. In addition to the topic of returning the displaced and refugees to their areas, the deal includes extending the transitional period by 39 months. The two parties signed the historical deal after overcoming several obstacles and difficulties during the negotiations, which lasted for a year. However, two powerful rebel groups, the Darfur-based Sudan Liberation Movement and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, did not sign, reflecting the challenges still facing the peace process. Sudanese protesters shut the southern port of Sudan in protest of a recently signed peace deal with rebel groups on Sunday. The protesters said the deal does not present the people of Eastern Sudan and that they are against dependence on foreign agenda. For iAfrica News, I am Juldanya Suare.
Sudanese transitional government and rebel groups signed a peace deal after many years of conflict. Now, to discuss more on this, I am joined on the line from New Jersey University in the United States. Is Josh Karjam, PhD and Assistant Professor of Security Studies. Well, Professor, many thanks for joining us. Now, would you say, of course, peace will finally achieve with this lasting peace deal between the Sudanese government and the rebel groups?
Mr. Conte, thank you for having me today. This peace agenda, or at least the peace deal, is definitely a promising step in the right direction toward peace. However, we need to be careful because this is far from being over. This is the case because we know from history and from research on these topics that in peace agreements, the implementation phase is often the key to lasting peace. And at the same time, this implementation phase is quite difficult, quite challenging, even more difficult than the negotiation phase that preceded the peace. From history, we've learned, for instance, that in Angola and Rwanda, people died more people died actually after the peace agreements than during the civil wars that preceded the agreements. Yeah. So we really need to be careful here, but it's definitely a promising and hopeful step that we saw this weekend, and there are many challenges ahead. Bottom line here is Sudan is far from being out of the woods, and we just need to be a little careful as to how we proceed from here.
Now, Professor, the government of Sudan thinks the new peace will help remove sanctions against Sudan and from the list of countries sponsoring terrorism. Is this a possibility?
Personally, I do not see a link between this deal and the possibility of Sudan being removed from the list of sponsors of terror. However, Sudan can still achieve that purpose through diplomatic efforts toward the United States. And in this regard, we've recently seen a visit by the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo back in August. And that, to me, is a sign that there are efforts in place or on the way to get Sudan removed. But we also know that Mr. Pompeo had, a few demands, a few conditions to remove Sudan. And I think those conditions will be more of a, will have a major impact on the process than this peace deal. I'm not sure the extent to which the current Sudanese government, which is, let's remember, a transition government, which is still fragile. So I'm not sure how they'll be able to uphold the deals with regard to the United States in order to get removed from the list. But I don't know if this deal, I don't think so, if this deal will actually impact that process.
All right. Now two of the rebel groups, the Darfur-based Sudan Liberation Movement and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in the north, did not sign the peace deal. Will this affect the ongoing peace process in Sudan?
Definitely. Definitely, this makes the peace process very vulnerable at this point. The fact that these two groups did not participate in the peace deal. Let's remember, these are two powerful groups. They're not just small groups within Sudan. Powerful in terms of the base of support that they have. They each have, broad ethnic base of support, both in the West for one group and then in the South for the other group. Now, they're also strong in terms of the military capabilities. All those factors remain a threat, a serious threat, I would say, to stability and peace within Sudan and within the region. So definitely the fact that we did not see them participate in this process should be a matter of concern to all parties involved. And I'm hoping that the Sudanese government will extend or pursue efforts to bring these two groups to the table and have them participate in the process. Otherwise, stability will not be achieved.
All right, we got to leave it at that. Professor Kodjo, once again, many thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. It was Professor Kodjo speaking to us live from, of course, New Jersey University on the recent agreement between the Sudanese government and rebel groups after signing a peace deal. Now, finally, the Gambia Transport Union has called on the president to reopen the country's borders and put in place COVID-19 regulations that will allow for safe passengers. The Gambia sought its land, air and sea borders on March 23rd, 2020 after the country registered its first case of the coronavirus and has since maintained these regulations, but plans to ease their travel, plans to ease air travel this month is ongoing. Now let's have more details on that in this report.
The Gambia Transport Union has raised concerns over the long closure of the country's borders, which brought travel and business across the Gambia and Senegal to a standstill. The union's president, Omar Cisse, told iAfrica TV's Good Morning Africa program on Monday that the borders need to reopen with government implementing COVID-19 regulations.
because corona.
The purpose of the closure of the border is not observed. People are crossing within the Gambia-Senegal border, and the people that are crossing within the border, there is no health facility and no security measures to observe those people. So I think borders should be opened now with strict measures.
Barrow's government has given deaf ears to recent calls to reopen schools and weekly markets in rural areas. However, Caesar said that he is optimistic that the government will listen to the concerns of the transport union and reopen the country's borders with effective COVID regulations.
It's our government.
We are hopeful that the government will reconsider its decision and open the border. It's our government, so if we raise our concerns as citizens, they have the responsibility to listen to us. Though it's risky to allow people to move at once in this COVID-19, but I'm sure that they will consider our concern.
In March, the government said it consulted a ministerial committee on the coronavirus situation before shutting down the borders to halt the spread of the virus. 7 months down the line, the virus has yet to be contained locally, and people have nonetheless crossed into the Gambia from Senegal with the virus, despite border surveillance protocols put in place by the government. Meanwhile, trade between the two countries has been severely affected, as well as lives and livelihoods of truckers and other motorists. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Daisy.
The president of the Gambia Transport Union, they are calling the Gambia government to reopen the borders. Well, with that, eventually brings this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, you can log on to our website on africa.tv. Well, once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and bye for now.
TRRC is mandated